I never imagined that the woman who once called me Dad would one day lock me out of my own house, change the doors, and look me straight in the eyes like I was a stranger. This happened just 3 weeks after my wife was buried. 3 weeks after I held her hand for the last time. 3 weeks after I thought the worst pain of my life was already behind me. I was wrong. Because losing my wife broke my heart. But what my daughter-in-law did next almost destroyed my soul. Before you see what happens next in my life, subscribe to this channel. And if you've ever faced betrayal inside your own family, comment your city or country below. I read every comment, and it helps people like us realize we're not alone. My name is Richard Coleman. I'm 67 years old, retired, and until recently, I believed I had lived an honest, peaceful life. For 42 years, I was married to one woman, Margaret. She wasn't just my wife. She was my anchor, my partner, my best friend. We built everything together. That house. Those walls. That roof over our heads. They weren't just wood and concrete. They were memories. Christmas mornings. Arguments that ended in laughter. Quiet nights holding hands on the couch. And when Margaret got sick, that house became a hospital, a prayer room, and a place where I begged God for just one more year with her. But cancer doesn't listen to prayers. The day she died, a part of me died with her. At the funeral, I stood there numb, shaking hands, hearing words that didn't mean anything anymore. People said, "Be strong," but they don't tell you how lonely silence becomes when the love of your life is gone. Our son, Daniel, stood beside me. He looked tired, broken. I felt for him. And next to him stood his wife, Emily. At that time, I didn't see her as a threat. Emily hugged me tightly and whispered, "Don't worry, Dad. We'll take care of everything." Those words haunt me now. After the funeral, Daniel and Emily insisted I stay with them for a few days. "You shouldn't be alone," Emily said gently. "Let us handle things." I didn't argue. Grief makes you weak. Trust comes easily when your heart is shattered. They told me they'd take care of paperwork, bills, and legal formalities. Emily even said, "You shouldn't stress about documents right now." I thanked her. God, I thanked her. For the first week, everything seemed fine. Then small things started changing. Emily began asking questions, strange questions. "Dad, where did you and Mom keep important papers? Did you ever update the house documents? Whose name is on the property now?" I thought she was just being responsible. After all, Daniel was my son. Emily was family. Or so I believed. One morning, about 3 weeks after Margaret passed, I told them I wanted to go back home. Emily's smile froze for just a second. "Back home?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "I need to be there. It's where your mother lived." She exchanged a look with Daniel. Then she said something that made my stomach tighten. "Dad, maybe it's better if you stay here for a while longer." I didn't like that tone. That afternoon, I drove to my house alone. As I turned into the driveway, something felt wrong. My heart started racing. The front door was different. The locks were new. At first, I thought I was confused. Then I tried my key. It didn't work. I tried again. Nothing. I knocked. No answer. I rang the doorbell. Still nothing. I walked around the house like a stranger, checking windows, the back door, all locked. That's when I noticed something that made my legs weak. A new nameplate near the mailbox. Daniel and Emily's name. Not mine. I stood there, a 67-year-old man, holding grocery bags in my hands, locked out of the house I had paid for, repaired, and protected for decades. My phone rang. It was Emily. Her voice was calm. Too calm. "Oh, Dad," she said. "I was just about to call you." "What's going on?" I asked. "Why don't my keys work?" There was a pause. Then she said the words I will never forget. "Richard, you can't come back here anymore. I felt like the ground disappeared under my feet. "What do you mean?" I whispered. Emily sighed, like I was being difficult. "After Mom passed, things changed. The house, well, Daniel and I need stability. You can stay with us, or we'll help you find a small place." A small place. Like I was a burden. Like the house wasn't mine. I demanded to speak to my son. Daniel came on the line, his voice low. "Dad, Emily's right. It's better this way." That sentence hurt more than anything Emily could have said. I sat on the curb that evening, watching the sun go down behind the same walls I had painted with my wife. I cried. I won't lie about that. But grief slowly turned into something else. Confusion. And then suspicion. Because something didn't add up. Margaret and I were old school. Careful. Prepared. Years ago, after a close friend lost his house to legal tricks, Margaret had insisted we update everything. I remembered clearly. One evening she'd said, "Richard, promise me one thing. No matter what happens to me, don't ever let anyone push you out of what we built." And I had promised. That night, sitting alone in my car, I realized something that Emily clearly didn't know. My name was still on everything. The house. The accounts. The documents. Everything. Emily thought grief had made me powerless. She thought age had made me weak. She thought locking me out would end the story. She had no idea. This was only the beginning. That night I didn't sleep. I sat in my car outside a 24-hour diner, staring at the glow of the neon sign, replaying Emily's words again and again. "You can't come back here anymore." For 42 years, that house had been my home. Now, in a single afternoon, I had been erased. I thought about calling the police. Then I stopped myself. Emily was smart. Too smart. She wouldn't have done this unless she believed she was legally protected. That scared me. So instead of reacting emotionally, I did something Margaret always taught me to do. I thought. The next morning, I drove straight to my old office downtown. I had retired years ago, but the building still stood, and so did a small safe behind a loose panel in my former desk. Margaret and I had hidden copies of everything there. Deeds. Insurance papers. Bank statements. Wills. I hadn't touched that safe in years. My hand shook as I unlocked it. Inside were neatly labeled folders, just the way Margaret liked. And there it was. The house deed. I opened it slowly, afraid of what I might see. But my name was there. Clear as day. Richard Coleman, primary owner. Margaret Coleman, joint owner. No changes. No transfers. No surprises. My chest tightened, not with fear this time, but with something else. Strength. Emily had made one fatal mistake. She assumed grief had made me careless. I took the documents and sat there for a long time, holding them like proof that I still existed. That afternoon I called Daniel. He didn't answer. I texted him. "We need to talk." Alone. Hours passed. Nothing. That silence told me everything. So I made another call, one I never thought I'd have to make. A lawyer. His name was Thomas Green, an old colleague I trusted. When he saw the documents, he leaned back in his chair and let out a slow breath. "Richard," he said, "legally speaking, they have no right to keep you out." "But they changed the locks," I replied. "They're acting like the house is theirs." Thomas nodded. "That's illegal. And if they moved in without your consent, that's even worse." For the first time since Margaret died, I felt something steady under my feet. "But there's more," he added. "If they try to claim your wife's passing transferred ownership automatically, they're wrong. You're protected." Protected. That word mattered. Thomas advised me not to confront them yet. "Let them think you're confused," he said. "People show their true intentions when they believe they're in control." So I waited. 2 days later, Emily called. Her tone was sweet again. "Dad, we're worried about you," she said. "Where are you staying?" "I'm managing," I replied calmly. She paused. "You know, we've already started making changes to the house. It's better this way." That sentence told me everything I needed to know. They weren't just locking me out. They were claiming ownership. That evening, I drove past my house again. The lights were on. My wife's curtains, the ones she picked herself, were gone. Emily had replaced them. I sat there in silence, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. That wasn't just disrespect. That was erasure. The next morning, Thomas filed the first legal notice. A formal demand. Restore access. Cease unauthorized occupancy. Acknowledge ownership. We sent it by certified mail. 3 days later, I received a response. Not from Daniel. From Emily. Her lawyer's letter was cold and confident. They claimed Margaret had intended the house to pass to her son. They claimed I was emotionally unstable. They even suggested I might be confused about the documents. When Thomas read it, his jaw tightened. "They're attacking your credibility," he said. "That means they're scared." That night, I broke down for the first time since the funeral. Not because of the house. Because of my son. I remembered teaching Daniel how to ride a bike. Helping him with homework. Working overtime so he could go to college. And now, he was letting his wife paint me as a confused old man. The next confrontation happened sooner than expected. I was sitting in Thomas's office when Daniel walked in unannounced. He looked older. Tired. "Dad," he said, avoiding my eyes. "Why are you doing this?" "Doing what?" I asked quietly. "Dragging lawyers into it. Making it ugly." I stood up slowly. "You locked me out of my own home," I said. "You changed the locks 3 weeks after your mother died." Emily stepped in behind him. Her face was calm. Controlled. "We're just protecting our future," she said. "You wouldn't understand." I looked straight at her. "No," I replied. "You didn't protect your future. You exposed yourselves." She smiled faintly. "You don't have proof." That's when Thomas placed the deed on the table. Emily's smile vanished. Daniel stared at the paper, his face draining of color. What is this?" he asked. "The truth," I said. Emily recovered quickly. "Those documents can be challenged," she snapped. "Intent matters." Thomas leaned forward. "Not more than signatures," he said calmly. For the first time, Emily lost her composure. She stood up abruptly. "This isn't over," she said. "You'll regret this." As they left, Daniel hesitated at the door. He looked back at me, his eyes filled with something I hadn't seen in years. Shame. But shame wasn't enough. Because I knew Emily wasn't done. And deep down, I sensed something darker was coming. Something she thought would finally break me. She didn't realize. Margaret had prepared me for war. After that meeting, I finally understood one thing clearly. Emily was not going to stop. People like her don't back down when they're exposed. They double down. The very next week, things escalated faster than I expected. Thomas called me early one morning. "Richard," he said, his voice serious. "They filed a counterclaim." I felt my stomach drop. "For what?" I asked. "They're asking the court to declare you mentally unfit to manage your assets." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Mentally unfit. After everything I had built. After every bill I paid. After surviving grief, loss, and betrayal. They wanted to erase me legally. Emily's strategy was clear now. If she couldn't steal the house outright, she'd take away my credibility. She painted a picture of me as an old, grieving man who didn't understand his own paperwork. And the worst part? Daniel signed off on it. Seeing my son's name on those papers hurt more than the accusation itself. The court scheduled a preliminary hearing. I walked into that courtroom wearing the same suit I had worn to Margaret's funeral. Not because I wanted sympathy, but because I wanted to remind myself why I was fighting. Emily sat across from me, calm and confident. Daniel sat beside her, eyes down, hands folded like a child who knew he'd done something wrong but didn't know how to fix it. Her lawyer spoke first. He talked about my advanced age, my emotional instability, my recent loss. He suggested that I was confused about ownership. When it was our turn, Thomas stood slowly. "Your Honor," he said, "grief does not equal incompetence." Then he presented evidence. Medical records showing I was healthy. Financial records proving I managed my accounts independently. And finally, Margaret's handwritten notes. Emily hadn't known about those. Years ago, Margaret had started keeping a small journal with important reminders and intentions. Not a will. Something more personal. One page was dated just a year before she got sick. It read, "If anything happens to me, the house remains Richard's home. No one is to remove him. This is his place of peace." The courtroom went silent. Emily's face tightened. The judge adjusted his glasses and looked directly at me. "Mr. Coleman," he said, "do you feel capable of managing your affairs?" I met his eyes. "Yes, Your Honor. And I always have." The judge nodded. "I see no reason to consider you unfit at this time." That ruling didn't end the case. But it crushed Emily's strongest weapon. Outside the courtroom, she cornered me. "You think you won?" she hissed quietly. "I think you crossed a line," I replied. She leaned closer. "You're alone now, Richard. No wife. No family. This fight will drain you." I looked at her calmly. "You underestimated one thing," I said. "I'm not fighting for money. I'm fighting for dignity." Her eyes hardened. That's when she made her next move. 2 days later, I got a call from my bank. They flagged suspicious activity. Someone had tried to access joint accounts. Someone who claimed to have authorization. Emily. She was trying to move money before the court froze assets. Thomas reacted immediately. We filed for an emergency injunction. The judge granted it within hours. All accounts frozen. No transfers allowed. Emily had lost another battle. But the war was far from over. That evening, Daniel showed up where I was staying. Alone. No Emily. He looked thinner. Broken. "Dad," he said softly, "she says you're trying to destroy us." I studied my son's face. "No," I replied. "I'm trying to survive what you let happen." He sank into a chair. "She says the house should be ours. That you already lived your life." Those words cut deep. I stood and placed Margaret's journal in front of him. "Read this," I said. He flipped the pages slowly. His hands began to shake. "She never wanted this," he whispered. "No," I said. "She trusted you to protect me." Tears rolled down his face. For the first time, I saw cracks in Emily's control. But I also knew something dangerous. A cornered person becomes reckless. And Emily was running out of options. The final hearing was scheduled. Ownership. Illegal eviction. Financial misconduct. Everything would be decided there. As I walked out that night, I felt Margaret's presence stronger than ever. She hadn't just left me memories. She left me proof. And soon, the truth would come out in a way Emily never expected. The final hearing arrived on a cold Monday morning. I woke up before sunrise, not because I was nervous, but because my mind was clear for the first time in months. This day wasn't about anger anymore. It was about truth. When I walked into the courtroom, I could feel it, the tension, thick and heavy. Emily was already there. She looked different. Not calm. Not confident. Her jaw was tight, fingers tapping against the table, eyes darting every time someone walked in. Daniel sat beside her, but there was space between them now. A silence that spoke louder than words. Thomas leaned toward me. "Whatever happens today," he said quietly, "you've already taken back your voice." The judge entered, and the room stood still. This was it. Emily's lawyer opened aggressively. He argued that Daniel and Emily had acted in good faith, that they believed Margaret intended the house to pass to her son, that changing the locks was done for safety reasons. Then he made one last attempt. He suggested I had emotionally abandoned the property by staying elsewhere. That's when Thomas stood up. And that's when everything changed. "Your Honor," he said calmly, "we call our first witness." A woman stepped forward. I recognized her immediately. Mrs. Helen Brooks, our next-door neighbor for over 20 years. Emily's head snapped up. Helen raised her hand and took the oath. "Mrs. Brooks," Thomas asked, "did you witness the defendants changing the locks?" "Yes," she said firmly. 3 weeks after Margaret passed. "And did Mr. Coleman give permission?" "No. He wasn't even there." The judge took notes. Emily's lawyer tried to object. Too late. Next witness. The locksmith. He confirmed the work order. Who requested it? Who paid for it? Emily. Then Thomas did something I hadn't even expected. He introduced video evidence. Security footage from Helen's door camera. Emily directing movers. Emily giving instructions. Emily throwing out boxes labeled Richard, personal. The courtroom murmured. Daniel's face went pale. Emily whispered angrily to her lawyer. But Thomas wasn't done. "Your Honor," he said, "we now address intent." He submitted Margaret's medical records. Dates. Signatures. Proof that Emily had tried to push document changes while Margaret was heavily medicated. The judge looked up sharply. "Is this true?" he asked Emily. She froze. Her lawyer tried to speak. The judge raised a hand. "Answer the question." Emily's voice shook. "I was only trying to help." That lie didn't land. Then came the final blow. Margaret's journal. Thomas read one final passage aloud. "If anyone tries to remove Richard from this house after I'm gone, they are acting against my wishes." Silence. Heavy. Crushing. Daniel broke. He stood up suddenly. "Stop," he said, his voice cracking. "Just stop." Everyone turned toward him. "She lied to me," he said, pointing at Emily. "She told me Dad agreed. She told me Mom wanted this." Emily stared at him in disbelief. "You said you trusted me," she snapped. Daniel shook his head. "I trusted you, and I lost my father because of it." That moment shattered whatever control Emily had left. The judge leaned forward. "I've heard enough." My heart pounded. The ruling came slowly, deliberately. The court found that the lockout was illegal. That Emily acted without consent. That I retained full ownership and immediate right of access. Then came the words I never thought I'd hear. "Mrs. Coleman," the judge said, "your actions constitute unlawful eviction and attempted asset manipulation." Emily's face drained of color. Daniel lowered his head. The judge continued. "Mr. Coleman will regain access to his home immediately. Any further interference will result in penalties." The gavel struck. It was over. Outside the courtroom, reporters gathered. Emily stormed past them, furious, humiliated. Daniel stopped in front of me. "I don't know if you'll ever forgive me," he said quietly. "I don't know either," I replied honestly. "But today you chose truth. That matters." That evening I returned home. My home. The locks were changed back. The door opened smoothly. Inside, the house felt wounded. Furniture moved. Walls altered. But the bones were still there. Margaret's presence was everywhere. I stood in the living room and whispered, "I kept my promise." But deep down, I knew one thing. The court battle was over. But the consequences were just beginning. The first night back in my house, I didn't sleep in the bedroom. Not because I was afraid. Because I wasn't ready. I sat alone in the living room, on the same couch where Margaret used to fall asleep with her feet tucked under mine, the lamp still on, a book open on her chest. The house was quiet, but not empty. Every creak of the floor felt familiar. Every shadow carried a memory. Emily had tried to strip this place of its soul, but she failed. Because you can move furniture. You can change locks. But you can't erase a life. I walked into the kitchen and opened a drawer she hadn't bothered to check. Inside were Margaret's handwritten recipe cards. Her handwriting shook near the end, but it was still hers. That's when it hit me. This fight was never really about a house. It was about respect. And Emily never saw me as a man who deserved any. The legal consequences didn't stop with the court ruling. A week after I moved back in, Thomas called. "Richard," he said, "the judge forwarded the case to Financial Review." Emily's attempt to access the accounts wasn't forgotten. The bank flagged her actions as intentional misconduct. Her employer was notified. Within days, rumors started circulating, not the kind you can control. Emily had always cared about image, status, control, appearances. Watching that crumble didn't bring me joy. But it brought balance. Daniel came to see me 2 weeks later. He looked like someone who hadn't slept in days. "She moved out," he said quietly. "Packed everything while I was at work." I nodded. "She said this was all your fault," he continued. "That you humiliated her." I looked at my son for a long moment. "No," I said. "She humiliated herself when she thought power mattered more than truth." He swallowed hard. "She's filing for separation." That word hung in the air. Separation. For the first time, Daniel wasn't standing behind her. He was standing alone. "I don't know who I am without her telling me what to think," he admitted. That hurt to hear. But it also explained everything. "You don't need someone to control you to be a man," I said. "You need courage to stand when it's uncomfortable." He nodded slowly. "I should have protected you." "Yes," I replied. "You should have." I didn't soften it. Because growth doesn't come from comfort. Weeks passed. The house slowly returned to itself. I rehung old photos. Fixed things Emily had updated, without asking. I even found a box of my personal items she had thrown into the garage like trash. Inside it was my wedding watch. The one Margaret gave me on our 20th anniversary. That nearly broke me. One evening, I stood in the backyard, staring at the garden she loved. It was neglected. Overgrown. Emily never touched it. So I cleaned it myself. At 67, on my knees in the dirt, my back aching, I planted new roses. The same kind Margaret used to smile at every spring. I spoke to her while I worked. Out loud. "I kept my promise," I said. "They didn't take me." And for the first time since she passed, I felt peace instead of pain. Emily tried one final move. A letter arrived from her attorney. Cold. Defensive. Threatening. She accused me of emotional damage. Of turning Daniel against her. Of refusing to compromise. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in the fireplace. I didn't need to answer. Because silence is powerful when the truth is already loud. Daniel and I didn't suddenly become a perfect family. Healing doesn't work that way. But we started meeting for coffee. Talking without lies. Sometimes we sat in silence. And sometimes that was enough. One afternoon, he asked me something that surprised me. "Dad, how did you not give up?" I thought about it. About the locks. The courtroom. The humiliation. "I wanted to," I said honestly. "But your mother didn't raise a man who disappears when he's pushed." He nodded, tears in his eyes. That was the moment I knew something important. Emily lost more than a house. She lost control over the narrative. And that's what people like her fear the most. I updated my will. Carefully. Clearly. Not out of anger. Out of wisdom. No confusion. No manipulation. No assumptions. Margaret's wishes. My protection. Locked in ink. As the months passed, neighbors started greeting me again like before. They had seen everything. They knew the truth. Respect returned quietly, the way it always does when it's earned. One evening, sitting on the porch, watching the sun set behind the same walls I once thought I'd lost forever, I realized something powerful. Emily thought age made me weak. She thought grief made me blind. She thought kindness meant surrender. What she didn't understand was that my name wasn't just on documents. It was written into every sacrifice. Every mortgage payment. Every night I stayed up worrying about family instead of myself. You can't erase that. You can't steal that. And you definitely can't intimidate a man who has already buried the love of his life and still chose to stand. If there's one thing I want you to remember from my story, it's this. Never let anyone push you out of your own life. Never let family use love as leverage. And never believe it's too late to fight for dignity. Before you see what happens next in my life, subscribe to this channel. And if you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted, comment your city or country below. I read every single one. My name is Richard Coleman. They thought locking me out would erase me. Instead, it reminded me exactly who I am.